You're listening to the Women Talking About Learning podcast. My name is Andrew Jacobs. Welcome. Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode, the flexible job design one of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. Firstly, thank you to everyone who sent a message to us last week with our return. Your comments are very much appreciated. We promised you some great podcasts in this series, and this one is an absolute cracker. It's also a bit of an e-learning network takeover with two of their directors in this session. Our first guest is Asli Derya, an experienced L&D lead with an extensive knowledge of learning design and digital learning. Asli has been working in L&D for the past 8 years with in-house L&D teams in a number of industries and roles before landing on the digital learning space. Asli is currently the Learning Design Director at Imperial College Business School. Our second guest is Gemma Wells. Gemma is a learning designer for the Opportunity Group. She has 10 years of experience in L&D and is self-taught in the area of digital learning. Gemma has experience in both facilitating training courses, designing training materials, and working with digital learning tools. Gemma has mainly worked in the regulated environments dealing with compliance training, but has now moved into the world of apprenticeships and looking at ways how we can help people achieve lifelong learning. As I said, both Asli and Gemma are on the board of the ELN, something that supports both their commitment to supporting and sharing knowledge. This is an awesome conversation. This is Women Talking About Learning. This is Asli and Gemma talking about flexible job design.
Hi, Gemma.
Hi, Asli. You okay?
I'm good. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, I guess talking about flexible job design or any topic, first thing to cover is what is it, right? So let's start from there. Our take on flexible job design and what it means to us. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'd love to. I read the title and I thought, this could be taken in quite a few different contexts. But to me, I think the thing that I latched onto the most is just how times have changed so considerably, and not just because of COVID, but I think flexible job design to me means that you can literally work anywhere, however you see fit, and it's just being so fluid in how you do things. And I don't think we're there yet. I think we're a long way off the true flexible working sort of ways of thinking, but that was where my sort of gut instinct took me when I read that title. I think yours was slightly different though, wasn't it?
It was actually for me when I first thought about the term, I actually had a very different take on it. It might be because of my studies and the conversation around career paths I was having at the time, and I thought flexible job design would relate to things like how people can have different career pathways in their lifetime and how different things are to our parents' generation, like job for life. It doesn't exist anymore. I was kind of thinking along the lines of that. And you might actually have one job title, but actually focusing on different types of projects that interest you, and how you can vary the work you're doing and be a different part of different types of work and not be stuck in a rut, so to speak. But of course, then when I reflected on and did a bit of Googling, I guess.
Good old Google.
Yeah, good old Google. Realize actually it's basically what we commonly refer as flexible working. And it's interesting because when I was talking about flexible working and how it's defined by different people differently, I had a colleague once who said, what is your take on flexible working? And it's like, I explained my understanding. It's just like, you know what, actually many people don't think of it that way because they often associate it with the flexible job design with part-time working or job share. And it's not just that. It's about flexing the time you work, as you mentioned, the day you work, the time of the day you work, where you work, and to fit around your life needs. But yeah, I guess that was my sort of two sides of the coin, but I guess it relates.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it's a strange one really, because when I first started in sort of the L&D world, God, 10 years ago now, if not more, it was very rigid, and it was very much like, I was a facilitator, that's how I started, and it was very much everything's done in the classroom, face to face, you see everybody, you at this point in the day, this is when you're going to be training. And I think as I've gone through my career in the L&D world, and it's taken many turns, and I've ended up where I am now, the flexibility it's just amazing. I mean, I've come from fighting to be able to just work one day at home because I'm a working mum. I don't hide from that fact. But just because I'm a working mum doesn't mean that I don't have career aspirations and I don't want to excel in my work. But I also don't want to spend massive amount of time away from my children, because, I had children for a reason. It wasn't to just dump them on the grandparents and think, oh, take a step back, I want a career. I think in this day and age now, as women, we should be able to have both. So that flexibility for me it's massive. And I think, especially with the roles, I've recently changed roles, and looking for jobs, I felt really sort of pigeonholed in what I could look at, because all the sort of really amazing sounding jobs were all sort of in London. And I don't want to be traveling to London 2-3 times a week. I've got 3 children at home. I don't want to have to leave them behind and work that way. But then I came across where I work now, and they're just fully remote. I work with people now that are based in the Northeast, in the Midlands. I'm in the Northwest. I mean, I even work with somebody who is based in the south of France. So that just shows how easy it is to be able to put that flexible piece in. But then going back to what you referred to as your sort of thinking around the flexible sort of way that we work, and the job sort of spec as well, you can literally do anything, anywhere, anytime, but it's all about upskilling yourself and being able to upskill yourself as well in that flexibility. And I love it. I really do love that that's the way it's going, but I still think there's so much more can be done.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's an interesting point you made, that is often assumed in the past that the working from home or flexible working is for women, only applicable to women. But actually, I read somewhere it was a pre-COVID world study that the 2/3 of people who work mainly from home in the UK were actually men.
Yeah.
So it's clearly not all about mothers or women only. It impacts a lot of people. So should we, as you referred to it before, should we talk about the elephant in the room, COVID, the pandemic that changed everything and had a massive impact on flexible working as well?
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, like I said, I literally would have to fight to get a day from home. Just because sometimes working from home, you can get in your own space, and you can I find I get a lot done when I'm at home, because I can get a good pattern. I mean, elements of it I do miss, being in an office and having that interaction with people, but I think with technology that we've got now, I mean, look at us, we're talking over a different medium, and it still feels like there's an interaction there, and you've not lost it in any way. But pre-COVID, it was a battle to be able to get anything, and then COVID almost forced businesses' hands to create this work from home. And I read something quite interesting online the other day. I think it was on the CIPD had done a study, and apparently 1 in 3 companies, compared to 1 in 30 pre-COVID, anticipated making more than half of their workforce remote.
Oh, wow.
So that just shows that the whole sort of job role and the ability to be able to flex where you hire people and open up that talent pool, it's on the forefront of a lot of businesses' minds, because before you just sort of think your talent pool was within the area that your business sits, so in London, in Manchester, in Liverpool. But now I think it kind of widens the net, and you can get talent from all over the country, all over the world in some elements.
Yeah, 100%. I think the pandemic has shown that flexibility can be unlocked in many, many more jobs than previously thought, in many different ways. And it accelerated a lot in terms of the employer views on working from home, particularly. But there has been, I guess, some good, some bad examples. For instance, I know businesses that allow full flexibility for their workers, and also increased parental leave allowances and paid parental leave allowances for homeschooling. I also know friends who would need to log on 9 a.m. sharp, and they could only get 30-minute lunch break and log off at 5 p.m. And it was all very closely monitored because, if you're not in front of me, I don't know what you do. And I guess those are the businesses who will lose in the long term unless they change their way of doing things. Can you imagine in the winter, you wake up, it's dark, you work, and you log off at 5 p.m., it's dark, and you lost the whole daylight and haven't even left your desk almost all day, and this is without having to deal with anything else like kids, the chores, parents, and caring responsibilities. Your whole mental health would be massively impacted. So
Hugely.
I think businesses who got this wrong will have a limited shelf life, or they will eventually learn how they need to adapt.
Yeah, because I think that's a big thing, isn't it? They're going to have to, I think, in order to survive in this new world, as we're calling it, there is that huge piece around adapting. I mean, not just the businesses, us ourselves adapting to this new way of working, because as you touched on there, health and well-being. I mean, it's easy to have a health and well-being practice within your business, but it's how do you adapt and make that more fluid for people that are working from home? Because as you quite rightly say, I'm sat in my living room currently. I can move into the kitchen and go make a drink, but I think there's an element of having that trust there, so that your workforce could take half an hour out of their day to go and walk around the block, have a bit of fresh air, run the children to school in the morning, because there's not that rigid start time as you touched on. So I think workforces need to get better at thinking that it's not a typical 9 to 5 world anymore, and have that fluidity there.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be driven by the leadership as well, because one of the examples I saw was that in one of the firms that the very highest level, the CEO sent a message during the winter months saying, I am blocking 12 to 2 every day on my calendar to, no meetings, no nothing, to have proper lunch, to go for a walk and all that. I will flex my time around that, but I suggest you do the same, because it's very important you don't sit in front of your screen all day. And that was, it's showing great leadership. And I guess thinking about what you said at the beginning, in terms of where you started your career and it was all face to face and everything, I guess I was very lucky personally in my L&D career, because everywhere I worked, it was flexible working was always on the table. So COVID didn't necessarily become a big revelation in terms of that, my personal experience. But I suppose on reflection, it prompted employers to be more involved in how good your setup at home was, because suddenly we started talking about kit, that do you have the right Wi-Fi, do you have the right seat, do you have a table, how do you work? Because again, you might be having your own house and your own space, but you might be having a house share in London. So you just have a room. What do you do in that? So it really made employers think about your setup, the technology, things which, again, I think is when you think about flexible job design, these are components of it. Because one thing to say, yes, you can work from wherever you can, but the other thing is to give the tools and technology to enable that productivity. So it's, my employer can say, yeah, you can work from home, but if it's taking like 4 hours to download the document from a shared drive, I fall behind, I get frustrated, I get demotivated, and no one benefits from that really. So yeah, in that sense, I think I've been very lucky, but I am also fully aware that not everyone comes from that perspective, and I fully respect. And also, I guess we are very lucky that we were able to work from home, because there has been many people who still they had to physically go to work.
Yeah, exactly. And it's strange, isn't it? Because I think we will see a massive influx of changes across businesses that perhaps even the ones that didn't have the ability to work from home during this whole strange time that we found ourselves in. And I think it's definitely some of the bigger businesses, I think it's opened their eyes to see what can be done. But as we said at the start, there's still so much more that can be looked at. And I think there's still an element of them looking at it very cut and chase. You either, when you're flexible working, you're either working from home or in the office, or a mixture of the two. And I don't think it's as cut and chase as that in my head anyway. Personally, I don't feel it is as cut and chase as that, because I think they're still sticking to that rigidity of us working 9 till 5 and us having set break times, and you have meetings at these times, and I think that there is still a lot to be done in that space, and to start looking at it from a health and well-being perspective as well. I think it's all good that a lot of businesses are starting to incorporate mental health first aiders into their sort of workspace, and I know the company that I last worked at, they were really big on the mental health first aiders, and they really promote it, and I know they've done a lot of work sort of setting up lunchtime cafes, like wellness cafes, I think they called them, which I think it's a really nice thing to sort of have there for people. It's not mandatory, it's not something that you're forced into doing, but it's there if you want it. And I think that's an important thing that sort of companies and leaders need to start looking at, just giving options to people and making the choice almost theirs in a way, so that they kind of buy into it a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another thing in my mind that the pandemic highlighted was more around gender inequality issues. It's often quoted by in Invisible Women, Caroline Perez highlights time and time again, women take on the majority of the unpaid care work. And with the schools closing, we see women taking on even more in terms of the homeschooling. Now you don't have the after school activities. Then, what do you do with the kids after they finish doing the schoolwork? So you have a lot to take on, and then you add full-time work, full-time caring responsibilities, housework, homeschooling, all that, entertaining the kids, and before you know it, I think you got something like 4 hours a day to sleep and self-care. And I remember reading on Women's Equality Party website that 97% of women who asked to be furloughed during the pandemic so that they could cope with the caring responsibilities was said no.
Yeah, it's scary that.
Yeah. So I think, and you mentioned that you've got 3 kids, and I'm sure they're all school age, and you had to go through quite a tough time during the winter.
Yeah, it was. I mean, to be fair, I am really lucky because my husband also, a point, like everybody can see him, but he's sat in the kitchen. So he's been working from home pretty much since March last year. He's slowly starting to go back into the office a couple of days a week now. So, it's getting the balance again, like redressed. But I was probably really lucky because he was here and, he could support in some elements of it. But I think as women, I think we shoulder that burden. I mean, I speak for myself. I'm sure there's other people out there listening, that would pick up on this, but you tend to shoulder all of that yourself, and you think that you're supposed to be the person that picks all of that up because history has wrote it that way. And as a woman, you do tend to think, right, I've got to do all this, I've got to work full time, I've got to make sure the kids are online doing the schoolwork, I need to make sure my 4-year-old isn't just sat in front of the TV all day and just sat watching all kinds of nonsense. I need to make sure she's got some form of interaction that takes her away from that. I need to also make sure we all get outside at some point in the day. So in my head in the morning, I'm going through this massive list of things that I should be doing as a mother, because that's the Instagram friendly posts that you see of people making colourful spaghetti all day. You think, oh my God, I'm not doing that. Does that make me a terrible mother because I'm focusing on my job too much? But we bully ourselves into thinking that that's the way we should be, and we should be shouldering it all ourselves. I mean, I'm lucky because my husband did take on quite a number of tasks with the children, and there was that balance. But you see it day in, day out, people posting on social media, just the stress that it caused. And I'm not going to lie, homeschooling was horrendous. I now know why I'm not a teacher, because I have not got the patience for that in my life. But it is, we do shoulder all that as women, and we think that that's the persona we should be taking. We should be everything to everyone. And we just find it hard to take that step back and have that flexibility. Going back to what we're talking about, we just don't have it.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of conditioning. There's a lot of assumed roles that needs to be unearthed a bit more. So past COVID, let's hope we are getting to the sunny end of the tunnel.
It's open.
Yeah. So a lot of right now the term I hear the most is hybrid working.
Yes, this is what when I did my little research into this whole conversation, thinking about how I wanted to take it, that was the key phrase that was used everywhere.
Yeah.
What's your take on it? What's your feelings around new terminology?
I'm a bit baffled because when I think about hybrid working, I was reading, and there's a definition: is a work style that enables employees to blend working from different locations, home, on the go, or the office.
Yes.
So, and so basically it's flexible working. So I am just, I do not necessarily see the difference. So is it a fad? Then you think about it. Well,
it's like gamification all over again. We're tagging stuff with these snazzy little names, but in essence, it's just flexible working. Why are we dressing it up to be something totally different?
Yeah, definitely. And I think deep down, it's a new fancy term for what it is. Yeah. But I guess I buy the argument from an employer perspective, rather. Do we have to call it something else? That's aside. But I guess it takes into account things like, will my offices need, what will my offices need to look like?
Yeah.
Do I need all this space? What do I do with those who wants to be in the office full time versus those who want to come in 2-3 days a week? So I guess in the future, there will be more intent in employers thinking about how they structure their assets, whether they want to call that flexible working or hybrid working. I genuinely do not see the difference, but I guess the consideration is going to be more around, okay, if we are living in this world, what does that mean from my work practices in terms of assets and technology enabling people? So yeah, I think that's where my view is on hybrid working. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm probably in the same school of thought as you, to be perfectly honest. It is just a different term for something that's been around for time. But I think you're right. I think from an employer's perspective, they've got to now start looking at things differently. So right from the very off, from the recruitment point of view, they've got to start thinking about who they're bringing into the business. Are they going to start widening that net so they can start looking at people that, not necessarily around the corner from the business? So are they going to purely be remote working? I know where like a few people that I sort of know quite well, where they work, they've had to adapt quite quickly and do that. And the way that they've started their recruitment now is just literally that, widening the net to the whole of the country and bringing people on from wherever. But I think it's one to think about, but is it necessarily different to flexible working? And I think I'm still stuck on that whole, it's just a fancy term for something that's already been in existence. But I think it's just from an employee's perspective, it's something they need to start thinking and building into their sort of their plans for the future, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it is right to now, what of course COVID did, it sort of accelerated that magic potion, so to speak. It's brought this magic potion to be a truly agile business, right? It's basically how can you bottle this up and actually replicate it? Okay, we don't want another pandemic, but how do you actually carry this to become a truly agile business? Because there's a growing sense that businesses in such a VUCA world need to develop future fit skills and be agile and quickly adapting to change. And as a byproduct of all this, we see more demand for flexible work practices. And I guess going back to my original assumption of what flexible job design means, it's not just about where I work, when I work, but what work I do. It's often mentioned, millennials, we are always at the middle of every research, that a millennial on average will go on to have 3 different careers in their lifetime. And I also read somewhere the other day that 92% of millennials specifically seek out jobs that offer flexible working. So I guess, and you have all these different conversations with various colleagues about how do they view that they will be working after this. And there's a growing sense of being back to the office 3 days a week. Because as you mentioned at the very beginning, being in an office environment, yes, virtual working, great, got a lot of flexibility, but you crave that human connection. Because we're not meant to live like this permanently, but we are not also meant to really, let's just go back to what it was. So it's about implementing that change and making that transition. But it's also about giving people work that is meaningful to them, because we can't just continue to see people as just like productivity machines. You come here, you do a job. It's for machines that.
Because people still want to carve careers, and like you touched on, it isn't like it was when our parents were working. I mean, my dad worked in the same job for what, 20 odd years, and prior to that, he'd been working since he was a teenager. And the jobs for life, weren't they, in those days? But now, even myself, and I'm touching 40, and I've had a fair few job roles. I've gone through different scopes of role. I mean, at my start of my job sort of life, I left university quite early because it wasn't for me. And I started working in a nursery looking after other people's children. So that's like a million miles away from where I'm at now. I mean, I've got my own children now. You can't give those ones back though, like you could when I was nursing. You have to keep your own children. Nobody told me that. But it's true, isn't it? Everybody these days, you find out when you hire people. I mean, I saw somebody's CV recently, and they'd had like 9 roles and they were still really young. But I think that's because there is that flexibility. Going back to your first thought on this title, people want to flex and learn and upskill and reskill, and I think that's the world we're in now, isn't it? Where you've got the ability to do that because technology is so amazing now that you can do that.
No, that's definitely. And when you look at the future in some companies, we see examples like Spotify, and I think it was one of the big 4 consulting firms as well, talking about enabling full mobility. Work wherever you like, whenever you like, as long as you're doing your job. And on the other hand, though, we still see businesses just going, okay, you can come back now. It's done.
So cut and chase, like, right, it's over, COVID's finished, 21st of June, want you in the office 5 days a week, 9 till 5.
And there is a big majority, I think, in the middle pondering what the new flexibility would look like moving forward. And it's a very varied landscape. And now I guess we need to recognize that humans create the most value, not when they are more efficient like machines, but when they use their judgment, experience, collaboration, and imagination. Add to that the rise and I guess the need for automating processes, because as I said, we're not machines. So you can't just measure productivity like for like, which, where the machines and productivity should sit, the metrics should sit. You have a very interesting picture. So the measure moves from being productivity of machine parts to human value creation. And to sort of empower that, employers really need to look at giving the choice to the individual on when, where, and how the work is done. So I know probably I'm thinking in a very futuristic sense, but actually it is happening all over us, because we are seeing automation, because we keep talking about automation, but it is happening. And as you remove those mundane tasks and you move them to automation, where does the human add value? And if the human value comes from something a lot more about being human, then you need to give them that choice. You need to say, you're adult enough to actually choose what you do, where you do, because how do you then get the most out of people if you don't give them that choice?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people I know, myself included, if you give them that trust by your manager, your senior leadership team, and you give them that trust to, just as long as you're getting the work done within the time frame that you're set, does it really matter if you're working, 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock, then you have a little break because you've got, I don't know, you've got children, or you need to go out, you've got an appointment, and then you're working later into the evening when the children have gone to bed. If that works for you, and that's the way you work best, and you're still getting the tasks in hand done, you're still, collaborating with the right people when you can, to me, it's a no-brainer. We shouldn't have that rigid working practice in place, because like you say, that's for machines. That's where, the automation comes in. That's quite rigid. So the flexibility needs to be given to the human element to be able to do what we can when we can. And I think that's a sensible way to look at it.
Yeah. I'm gonna now throw you another myth, or is it a myth? Smart working.
I
This
like
is a new
this.
right?
Go on.
Smart working. This is a
Okay.
new term. It's gaining traction again. What is it? What's the difference between smart working, hybrid working, and flexible working? And I guess what you were mentioning there in terms of, structuring your work-life balance based on your own needs. I guess the smart working, apparently, so does say Google, is about having the technology slant to it. So having that enablers with the other technology enablement to your working, which is what we find is very important, actually, that in the past year it was, yes, you can work from home, but do you actually have the ability to work from home in terms of the the kit you use, the internet you have, and can you actually connect? And I had so many colleagues in the past year that their kid were on exactly, so
included. Everybody on the internet all at once on Zoom lessons, and you're like, oh my god, my Teams has crashed.
Yeah. So then how do you again deal with that? It's about having the sort of having the innovative work practices, so to speak, that enable the flexibility to a greater extent. And it has links to the digital disruption we are seeing. Again, it goes back to automation and using a technology to make people's lives easier, but doing all of this shouldn't lead to making people's redundant, but it should be able it should be about tapping into the human creativity. There you go, the word came to me.
Exactly. And it's not about taking humans out of it, because it gives us another element to focus on. So it takes away all that automation piece, and it gives us the creativity to be able to do more. And it just opens up a whole new world of sort of creativity, collaboration. It's so important.
Yeah. But I'm going to be a bit controversial now. Of course, it's also important to understand what flexible job design isn't.
Yes.
So it's not about 0-hour contracts, because it's one of the ways these contracts being defended is the flexibility it provides, supposedly. And it's not about only being on low income, low security jobs.
No.
Statistics show that there's actually a very low number of job shares in the C-suite level, which is very discouraging, because you're thinking, okay, so if I start working flexibly in one way or another, does that put me off from being promoted or, furthering my career? And as with everything, I guess leading by example is very important here. So the business leader need to show that, yes, you can work flexibly and still can get promoted, because there's a lot of the what the new generation wants is the flexibility, and even taking it a step forward, but not be just employed by their employer, but have their own side business too. And I think in terms of circling back to the women aspect, is that yes, flexible working is great for women, but it shouldn't be only seen is for women.
Exactly, yeah, because in the past, flexible working has always been that stigma around a woman goes off and has a baby, and then they ultimately want to come back part-time. And that's the old stigma that's attached to flexible working that some people and some companies just cannot let go of. But it isn't about women having babies, because not all women want to have babies. And it's not just about women, it's about
And I'm gonna, interject
No,
there, that women
go
do
for
not have the babies on their own. So that's the
it.
interesting
Exactly.
bit in my mind. But yeah.
No, and that's what I was going to touch on, because I know some places, when they brought in that rule around men and women could share the whole maternity paternity thing, and you could do it 50-50. Not a lot of companies took that up. And I still think that's something that's overlooked, and it's that expectation on the woman to have the maternity leave and be off for X amount of time with the baby. But who's to say that that's the right way to do it? A man might want to, I mean, I know my husband would quite happily have stayed at home with the baby while I went off to work. So it's not just around women wanting to have babies and come back flexibly. Loads of people want to be able to work flexibly, because touching on what you said, you don't want to just do your job. I mean, like, you and I are both on the board for the ELM, so that's a side sort of project that we work on. So it's having that flexibility to be able to do that as well. I mean, I'm really lucky where I currently am now, that they love the fact that I'm part of the ELM, because they know they can draw on that and utilize that in sort of the way we work. But I know some places, they're not keen on people having that side piece. They feel like it's a threat, or it's gonna take away from what you're doing in your day job. So it's a bigger thing, flexibility. It's not just around what it used to be. Women goes off and has a baby and they want part-time roles. It's not as clear cut as that anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this was one of the most outlandish examples of flexibility I heard of. So it was through one of the videos we were doing, and it was this chap. He's a consultant in a consultancy firm as an employee, but he's also a sweet potato farmer.
I love that.
Yes, I mean, he's got massive land. He grows sweet potato, like in its scale. He was talking about like 8 tons a year. Yes. Also, friends who used the pandemic actually as an opportunity to start their own, side cake business and sweet businesses while being employed full time. And there are businesses out there who would allow this. I'm very lucky to be working for one of those, actually. So yes, I think the future holds other levels of flexible job design for people. And I think it's because we are more and more acknowledging that work is not the center of it all.
No.
You can work hard and play hard too. Family matters, other things in life matters, and also the nature of work doesn't have to be something to pay the bills, but can have a lot more fulfilling meaning. And I guess at the end, it's all about that balance.
Yeah, and everybody talks about the whole work-life balance, but I think the key thing for me in sort of being flexible with my work is you spend a lot of time working, and you've got to enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, then that's when it starts to really sort of bog you down, and it has an impact on everything that you do. So I think the fact that it's starting to shape now, the whole flexible job design, but watch this space. I guess I think things will start to change and get better as the world moves on in its crazy way that it is at the moment. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic. We probably could talk for hours on it, though, couldn't we, Asli?
Yes, we could. But let's put a pause on there for now. And it was great talking to you. Thank you for all the insight.
Yes, you too.
Wasn't that superb? I didn't want to stop this chat. The way it ebbed and flowed across so many topics that are relevant to women and that men should hear. There were, in this episode, tons of links from what Asli and Gemma were discussing, and those links, along with their contact details, are in the show notes. Please make sure your managers and colleagues listen to this one. It's 35 minutes of common sense. A massive thanks to Asli and Gemma for such a great episode. And as always, if you'd like to join in, please do get in touch. We're recording a few more episodes in the next few weeks, and the list of topics is on the website. You can find all of our contact details in the show notes. Once again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon. You have been listening to the Women Talking About Learning podcast. Women Talking About Learning is available on all podcast platforms, including Apple and Google Podcasts. You'll also find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, and other music streaming services. Make sure to like and subscribe. It helps more people find us. You can find out more about Women Talking About Learning via our website, womentalkingaboutlearning.com. Make sure you tune in next time for more women talking about learning, for more of the signal and none of the noise.